Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to AGNT, the Association of Global New Thought. Our AGNT Speaks is where every week we come together as an agent advisory council to have a conscious conversation about spiritual principles as it relates to the world within us and also to the world around us. I am your host, Reverend Deborah Johnson. I come to you from Santa Cruz, California, on the Monterey Bay, just outside of the Silicon Valley, a little bit west of the San Francisco Bay Area. I come to you with a passion for awakening mindfulness, for cultivating care, and inspiring action. This is my debut hosting AGNT Speaks, and I am so pleased to be joined this week with my colleague and social justice cohort, the Reverend Dr. David Alexander, who is live with us today from the Atlanta area, where he serves as the spiritual director of the Spiritual Living Center there in Atlanta. Welcome, David.
Hey, good morning. Good morning.
And you know, before we get started, we have a little bit of something that we would like to do, a little extra something today.
I think the audio from Barbara from your computer has to be unmuted. But
what
I
we're
get
trying
it.
to do is sing you happy birthday.
Yeah, I get it. I received it.
Reverend David is the birthday guy this day. So we're so honored to have you with us on this particular day. And I feel doubly blessed because I get to be with you twice.
Yeah.
There's a series that's going on now, an inclusion series that has 2 workshops in it, Cultivating the Consciousness of Inclusion. It's a 5-week workshop series that ends today. And part 2, you can sign up for either a workshop or both. And part 2 begins in 2 weeks. Cultivating the Consciousness of Inclusion. So we're doing Unmasking Privilege right now. And Reverend David is one of the facilitators. So we are having a grand old time.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome. And I know you, like I, am somebody who's very passionate about social justice work. And I would like for you to share with us a little bit about what brings you to do this work. And we can talk a little bit later about some of these things that we're doing together, but why is it so important that we talk about unmasking privilege and that we talk about creating environments of inclusion?
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, I was just on a call exploring a master's program in theology and social justice and dialoguing, and there was a question of that. It was what brings you to the table, and from a theological background, it was really my reading of. I'll paint a picture for you. Back in the day, I moved to Portland to work for, and even before that, when I was in St. Louis, I'd go to these 24-hour coffee shops, and I'd have stacked up on my coffee table, I'd have Ernest Holmes, I'd have Paul Tillich, I then discovered Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and then eventually I discovered James Cone and Shelby Spong. And so at any given night, I'd have some combination of those and trying to figure out how, and I'd be drawing Venn diagrams and trying to figure out how all these ideas and thoughts weave together. So I come at it from an intellectual and spiritual curiosity and interest, because I grew up in New Thought and grew up in this idea of oneness and wanting to see it played out. And so I've always had a deep curiosity, but I also come at it from a heart space and skin in the game kind of perspective as well. I carry with me from a workshop that AGNT did in San Diego on social justice a number of years ago. We did a stone ceremony, and so I carry this stone here that has Williams, because this was about our work and our reason, our why for the work. So William's name is on one side, and my oldest son Josh's name is on the other side. And this rock is in my pocket every Sunday when I preach, and I put it in my bag when I travel. And those are the real reasons, to be awake and aware every day of the world that is receiving my 6'4", almost 200-pound, son, black son, and then imagining how might the world be different when my 4-year-old is 16 and probably 6'4" also on the trajectory that he's on. That there's a real awareness you have to have about having a tall, stout, young black man in the world today, and he wants to get his driver's license and go out there. And so I'm just hypersensitive and aware of those things and all that means. And my work in this field is about what measurable difference can I make so that the awareness that I have about the world that is receiving him is different when my 4-year-old is 16. So I've got literally a timeline that I'm working on.
So share with me a little bit. Do you find that you get pushback from people sometimes thinking that you've gone overboard, or you're being overly sensitive, or you're making too much of a big deal out of all of this stuff? Do you get any of that?
Not as much since I moved to Atlanta, but it is out there, it would be foolish to say that it is not here too. Although with COVID, I have somewhat of a protection that it's not necessarily in the room. And I think if there were those people in the community, they probably left by now. So there's kind of a weeding out that happens. And I don't even say that with any joy. I think it's sad when people leave communities, because I said the other day, for Pastors Appreciation Month, ministers are lovers of people. It's not our desire to push people away, but we want to be clear about what we're here to teach. And if people decide that they can't hang with that, then it's a different thing. But yeah, people have said, well, and all the lines, right? But we're all one. We're all the same. So why focus on all this stuff of distinction? Why this work called The Lie of Whiteness? Why focus on that? That seems so. Why would you even use that language, Rev? It seems so divisive and agitating to people. And my response to that is, well, we are a group of people that study consciousness and how consciousness works. And so if this sign said, lack is a lie, right? Nobody'd have an issue with that in New Thought. They'd go, yeah, right on. Lack is a lie, and everybody's prosperous, and we're all prosperous because God is all there is. And, teach it, Rev, we study how to identify the error thoughts that aren't working, how to eradicate them, and how to replace them with the divine truth. And racism, supremacy, whiteness, on down the list, these things are error thoughts in the collective consciousness. So why can't we address them with the same clarity that we have in our movement to address things from a consciousness perspective? Yeah, there's pushback for sure.
Yeah. As I mentioned a couple of moments ago, that you and I are both facilitating in a workshop right now, Unmasking Privilege, the Art of Sharing Power. And one of the things that I have brought up in that particular workshop is this idea of the threefold nature of humanity. And it's really true for everything, in the spiritual world that we can see that's manifest. There's only God, so everything comes from God. But in terms of this threefold nature, that there's a way in which each and every one of us is like absolutely all other people. It's just our universal humanity. We're all the same. There's ways in which each and every one of us is like some other people. And then there's ways in which each and every one of us is like no other person. This is going to be true for everything. If you have a tree, there's a way in which that tree is like all other trees. Right. There's a way in which it's like some trees, it's an apple tree, it's an orange tree or whatever. And then there's ways in which that tree is like no other tree. Mm-hmm. And the point that I was bringing it up, because it's primarily spiritual communities that we have in this particular workshop series, is that what I've noticed is that the progressive spiritual communities want to hang out in one or three. They want to talk about how we're all like everybody else, or we're all just unique individuals. And somehow we get afraid to talk about those ways in which we're like some and not like others, where we really do have a variety and difference in our experience. Because as much as we say that we want diversity, we're afraid of it. Mm-hmm. Because we associate diversity with difference and difference with divisiveness.
Right. Yeah. And when we say, particularly in church spaces, and we were talking about this last week, and a lot of good stuff coming up in the chat on that last week's teaching, that when progressive spiritual communities say that they want diversity, what they often want is the assimilation of different people. Right. So they want people of color to come to their white church and pray and sing and worship like they do, and like what they like, rather than bring their unique culture or song or dance or prayer or whatever into the space and create something wholly different because they're there. Exactly. So, we say we want diversity, but we often just want assimilation of more variety.
Exactly. So often when we say we want diversity, we want diversification of the people who come through the door.
Right.
We just want different people to come through the door to act like us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
As opposed to we want to change. Mm-hmm. That we want to change, that we want to be inclusive, that we want to be and reflect the world that is around us. Mm-hmm. In a way that makes people feel warm, in a way that makes people feel included. That takes an intention. It takes an intention. Too often we have blind spots, these blinders, and what we say that we can't see. And it's not helpful if we're trying to create a world that works for everyone. If you tell me that there's things about me that you can't see, then you can't support me in that.
Right. Yeah, it requires that, what we're talking about requires that I consider your experience.
Yes.
And I consider it as valid to you. Yes. It may not be valid to me, right? I don't, my wife and I talk about this all the time. There's things that I'll make an assumption about or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, because for me, that's not an issue. I don't think about personal safety if I'm walking through a parking lot at night, usually. That's not something that's commonly on my radar, but I need to consider it for her or for someone else. So the consideration, the deference to other people's lived experience. And here's the thing in New Thought, right? We say, well, the way I frame it in my classes that I teach is your experience is real, but it's not the truth of who you are.
Yes.
But it's important to hold both of those things so that we don't dismiss experience. It's not, we're not dismissing, but we're also not giving it so much power that it's, ruling you. So again, if we change the subject to something that's, lack and prosperity, for example. So current experience of lack is your experience. I don't have enough money to do this or to do that this week or whatever the case may be. But the truth of who you are is that you are prosperous and abundant. And so both are true. And it's that both and space that we need to bring into this social justice realm and conversation about humanity that is really honoring, and to say that, people of color, women, people on the margins, LGBTQAI community, they have had different walks through this world and different unique experiences that are different than mine. And if I'm going to practice oneness, and connect with them, then I need to consider the validity of their walk in this world.
You're absolutely correct. For us to hold that paradox between the oneness and the diversity is part of our spiritual challenge. But they go hand in hand. The example I sometimes give is my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who had a really green thumb. She passed it down to her son, my dad. It kind of stopped right there. But she could make anything grow because she really, really loved plants. But because she really loved plants, she was very sensitive to the nuances. She knew exactly what the roses needed. She knew exactly what the chrysanthemums needed. She knew exactly, it's like they all need a certain degree of moisture and sunshine and soil depth and all these different things, but not necessarily in the exact combination. So if you treated all of the flowers the same, watered them all the same way, gave them all the same amount of sunlight, some are going to survive more than others. And the ones that are going to survive are the ones for whom that environment is the most conducive. But because she loved them so much, it was no sweat off her back to pay attention to what each one needed and shift it a little bit so that all can survive. Unfortunately, we wind up projecting our own values, our own sensitivities onto everyone else when we fail to see what theirs are.
Yeah, and what is beautiful, and what I get from that is the respect that is demonstrated in that, in the particularity of this is what this plant needs, and it's different than what this plant needs. And it's the same for children. If you've got more than one kid, this kid needs something different than this kid, even though they're in the same house, the same parents, and you're feeding the same dinner, although they may have different allergies or different things going on there too. But that's your job, right? That's the demonstration of love and respect to your children, to say that they're not all the same. They need different things. And so it's the same for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. And we come here, we both serve on the Leadership Council of AGNT. And one of our goals is the world that works for everyone. The world that works for everyone, which means that we have to be able to see. We have to be able to have an honest assessment. In the 12-step program, they call it a fierce inventory, a fierce inventory of what's going on so that we can do our work, so that we can heal.
Yes.
And I think you did a book that's based on some of that.
We did, yeah. So this idea of I'm always getting it around. This is a lie. That it was Reverend Andrea Travers is the editor. She's in California. She's a member of Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, and a number of our practitioners came together and helped me with this vision that I had, which was to apply the 12-step wisdom to racism and to white supremacy. And so we worked with several different titles, but we ended up calling it Recovery from the Lie of Whiteness. And it takes you through, it's a workbook, and it takes you through. There's readings and stories from people of color, our practitioners, and then exercises and questions to answer on every single step going through the 12 steps. Because what I came to, in the website's lieofwhiteness.com, and what I came to a couple of years ago when this project was birthed in my consciousness, was we need to treat racism and white supremacy like the disease that it is, the disease of consciousness. And I realized that, book studies on Ibram Kennedy's books and caste and all of these great, that's all great, and those should continue to happen. Book clubs are awesome, and ministers doing mini sermons on those things is wonderful. But I realized, as a white person, speaking of, our first course here that's wrapping up tonight of Unpacking Privilege, I realized for me that because of my hue and because of my identity as a cisgendered white male, I am baked in this 400-year lie of whiteness that constructed this country and its policies and its approaches and its viewpoint and its consciousness for hundreds of years. And addressing that, dealing with that, confronting that honestly is going to be one step at a time, one day at a time, every day for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be able to take a class with you or read a book and then just be like, oh, okay, I'm good. I'm over here now. I'm in the good people club. It's like, no, it's not going to work like that. It's something that I have to address every day, one step at a time, one day at a time. And so when I was praying and meditating on that, the idea of the 12-step approach came. So we've rewritten the 12 steps in relation to dealing directly with whiteness and white supremacy. And we highly encourage you to check it out. You can do it on your own and do self-inventory and self-guide yourself through the book, or you can get together with people. We have study groups that are doing it in churches and et cetera. And it's all there on the website.
Great. I thank you so much for that work, David. And if people are asking themselves, like, what in the heck is he talking about here? Race, as we know it, is a social economic construct. Yep. It was literally created. The construct of race itself was created for economic purposes and for economic benefits. It really isn't about our DNA.
Right.
Less than 0.001% what we call race is accounted for in our DNA, which is why we can exchange body parts and blood and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I would ask people to this simple question: why is Barack Obama Black when his mother is white? Why is Kamala Harris Black when her mother's Indian? Why is Tiger Woods Black when his mother is Thai? You know, there's equal amount of DNA there, but the answer to that question of why they are classified that way gets to the heart of this social construct that we're talking about. So I'm putting that out there. It's just a little bit of a teaser to ask everybody to go a little bit deeper in their inquiry. There is a workshop that's going to be coming up soon. It's going to start on October the 20th, which is 2 weeks from today. Both Reverend David Alexander and I will be a part of that. And it is cultivating the consciousness of inclusion. And the good thing about it is that if you sign up for it and go through AGNT and you put in AGNT in the code, you will be able to be making a contribution to AGNT. They'll get 20% of all of the registration fees that come in. There's a tiny URL, and it is unmasking inclusion, and you'll be able to see that information on Agent's website. On the website as well, if you go to agnt.today, you will be able to find ways in which you can donate. You'll get information about our spiritual leaders, more information about the extraordinary programs that we do. And we want to encourage you also to live stream into some of our centers or some of our places of worship that you can find online if you look through New Thought directories. Next week, our guest is going to be Dr. Edward Villon, who for the past 25 years has been the spiritual director at the Centers for Spiritual Living in Santa Rosa. And more recently, he is the spiritual director of the entire Centers for Spiritual Living movement. And I will be hosting that and then coming back on the 20th as a guest. So you're going to be seeing me, a lot of me at this Agent Speaks for this particular week. But I'm going to ask you on your birthday, the other Rev D, would you mind closing us out with a little spiritual word to solidify these things that we're talking about now.
What occurs to me that's related to the workshop that we're with you, that we're wrapping up, and I really want to encourage everybody, take this workshop. And do I have it correct that if they sign up for the Consciousness of Inclusion, are they going to get access to
Yes.
the first series? Yeah. So I told my practitioners that last night, sort of a 2-for-1. Sign up for the Consciousness of Inclusion. You'll get access to the materials from the first series, and it's well worth it, well worth your time. Brilliant stuff, original work from Reverend Deborah Johnson and her consciousness and 40 years of doing this. And it's just please do it. Sign up right now. One of the things I'm looking at, and I want to talk to you about offline, is it's time to start writing some new classes and new curriculum around New Thought principles with new contemporary leaders and or pillars, if you will. And I think one of them is James Baldwin. Yes. I think that he is the principles of New Thought live in his writings and can be pulled out in such powerful ways. And so I'm thinking of his quote about all is not lost. Mm-hmm. All is not lost because responsibility is not lost. Responsibility cannot be lost. It can only be abdicated. Mm-hmm. The moment one refuses abdication, one begins again. Hmm. And that to me is at the heart of this work. If you jump into these workshops with Reverend Deborah and I, if you jump into the Lie of Whiteness work, if you jump into reading Caste or something else, some other work, you're beginning a book club at your spiritual community or your center or your workplace, then you are an agent in the world that is choosing to begin again. You're refusing abdication of the responsibility that says that we all belong to each other as a human family. And that is a task that all of us must answer. And we can do it in small but significant ways. You just wake up today and say, how can I refuse the abdication, accept responsibility, and do what is mine to do today? In doing so, I am a drop in the water that is beginning again. And within that is the hope for humanity. That's the word I have.
That's so beautiful. Thank you, Reverend David. You can find him once again at the Spiritual Living Center in Atlanta. I'm with Innerlight Ministries in California. We're actually sponsoring this upcoming workshop, the Cultivating the Consciousness of Inclusion. You can find us both on social media. In my church at Innerlight Ministries, we always end with take this consciousness and multiply it. See you next week.